Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to share with you my Pendulum Magician deck profile. You guys have been asking for it to follow up with a Pendulum deck that is pretty much kind of connected to the same character with Pendulum Magicians immediately. And you know what? Sure, why not? Here is a list for you guys. Hope you will enjoy it. But before we jump right into the video itself, I'm going to remind you that if you want to see more videos like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It helps a ton. Let me know in the comments down below what particular things you have a question about, that you don't understand. What particular engines would you run? What is your particular card choices? I'm really interested in that every single time in order to improve my list and essentially just see the best list I can make possible. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video itself. Alright, so two last things I would say before we jump right into the deck. The first one is for the masterduel players. I know that this list is not for you. Don't worry, as always, at the end of the video, I will have a section dedicated for you guys, so you can essentially change things or get an idea what do you want to do in your list. The second thing I would say is that this list is basically depending on to personal preference. There are some particular cards here that are cornerstone for the most part, but some particular people like to run the DPE engine, some people like to run Destrudo, some people like to run Fairy Tale Snow. I decided to go with a little bit more of the vanilla one because I just really like it and been working really well for me. But again, it's up to you. What do you want to run in your list? But now let's get started. So starting things off, we're going to start with the 4 cornerstones of any Pendulum Magician decks these days, which are 3 copies of Double Iris, 3 copies of Wisdom Eye, 3 copies of Oath, which is my favorite out of the old ones, and 3 copies of Harmonizing. Basically, these are the heart and soul of the deck where it comes to the magician stuff, and they're really good. Harmonizing is probably the best card in the deck where it comes to extension and everything. This card, when you pendulum summon it from the hand, which you can only pendulum summon it from the hand, will give you the ability to summon another magician directly from your deck. Basically, you can summon a level 6, can summon a level 4, whatever you need to for a rank 4 or rank 6 play is just giving you that. The other materials, when you use it for a fusion, synchro, or exceeds, have to be only magicians, but for link summoning it doesn't really matter, so it's actually fine. Second thing I would say about this card is that it's also just a great card sometimes in scales in late game, because if you have enough magicians in your extra deck, this basically makes your monsters 500 to sometimes 1,000, I think, in really late game, big monsters, which then can just get over things. Even 200 attack can actually be the big change to get over something or just close out the game, so that's why I also like this card sometimes in scale. But mostly this is just your free extender. It's a great card, it's very good, and it's the card that you just want to resolve every single turn because it just gives you so much advantage. 3 copies of Oath, this is your main low scale. This is also my favorite, like I said, from the old magicians, from the structure deck of Master of Pendulum. This card in the scale and in the monster zone kind of do the same thing. In the scale, if you have another magician in scale, he can recover any magician from your extra deck or Odd Eyes or Performer Paul card, I believe, except itself, which is really cool. The other thing, actually not Performer, a magician or Odd Eyes. I kind of just wanted to double check that because sometimes they have effect with Performer Pulse as well. But the other thing is that it does the same thing in the monster zone, but for cards in the graveyard. It's recovered an Odd Eyes or a Magician Pendulum from your graveyard, which is really cool. So this card is your main skill too. It's a level 6, this plus this, or Barony the Floor, which is very cool. You can just summon that before you even get Nibiru'd, which is really powerful. Secondly, these guys. These are your other really good cards. Wisdom Eye is basically any scale you want. You play this card at 3 because you put it in scale. You pop it, you put whatever you want to in your scale. Very good. It's also unaffected by Ash because it's put in scale, not add to end or basically sent to grave or draw, so this card can play around Ash, which is ridiculous, and I love this card a lot, and can put you whatever you need to, so this card is a must of 3 in my opinion. I know that there's some people who also like to run 3 Pendulum Coal, which does conflict with this card, which we'll talk about it when we'll get to the spells, but this card is definitely a mandatory 3 of. Then 3 Double Iris, this card is insane, this getting you your Pendulum Graphs. You cannot destroy it in the first turn, but it's still a great card that you can pop yourself. It's a great scale 8. It's a great card to also help you just dealing double damage in finishing games. It's just a great card overall. It's also just a great level 4 to have. The ability to just get the Pendulum Graphs is absolutely amazing. And we'll get the Dimension Force support. This card is going to even become more powerful because we're going to also have a Pendulum Graph monster that we can add from our deck to our hand, which is the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Ritual monster that is going to be revealed, for us, available in about, I think, 2 months. So this card is going to become even more powerful then. So that's actually really, really cool. But that does it for those, and then for the additional magicians, which will go a little bit more quickly with those, because I think these are less, like, you know, need explanation. Double copies of Mr. Purple Poison, double copies of Celestial, which could be run at 1, but I like to run this at 2. 1 copy of Dragon Pit, 1 copy of Black Fang, and 1 copy of White Wing. These are also your Pendulum, and of course I forgot about Time Gazer, but yeah. These are your other Magician ones. Time Gazer is because of Chronograph Sorcerer, which we'll get to in a second. Black Fang is just pretty mandatory at 1. Some people like to run 2, some people like to run 1. I like to run 1 most of the time. 2 always just felt worse than Celestial, which Celestial and Black Fang kind of just serve the same purpose in a way, but it's more up to personal preference. Dragon Pit is to deal with back row, Celestial is just a good skill 8, and just in general, like, it's actually your second best normal summon if you just have the materials for everything, because it's like, it will search you something during the end phase, so that's kind of good. So, like, if you have Perform Pulse, Skull Cobra Joker, this is your best normal summon in terms of searching, but if you just need to spend your normal summon on this is actually not bad, as long as you have another Pendulum monster. And then Purple Poison, when your spellcaster monster attacks, it increases by 1200, which is amazing, as well as just in general helping you to pop face-up cards on the field, which is also really amazing, and it's also a low skill. Now, in the case of White Wing, this is probably the card that people are just looking at and just thinking to themselves, why do I run this card? Well, this card has 2 reasons. The first one, actually 3. The first one is a low skill, which does come up. The second reason is because it's actually protecting your Dark Spellcasters, which we do have a little bit of effects that destroy cards in the game right now, so having some kind of protection is actually really, really cool. And the other thing is that this card is your tuner monster that you can use whenever. Like, this card, unlike Harmonizing have the problem that you can only use Pendulum Magicians, right? But let's say you're getting stuck in a way that just, like, prevent you from doing anything, and, like, you need your other monsters to do some particular stuff. You can just basically get this to your side of the field, or just, like, you know, search it or get it, and then just this will serve as your tuner to get something like, I don't know, a Savage Dragon that you're not able to bring out, or any other thing that you can just think of. Like, specifically Savage is in this deck, but if you have anything else that you can think of, that's also an option as well. So that's kind of like a good card in general. If you don't want to run this card, you can run whatever other card that you want. Then for the additional Pendulum supporting cards, we have triple copies of Chronograph Sorcerer, 1 copy of the Return from the Banlist Astrograph, 3 copies of Perform Pulse Skull Cobra Joker, and 3 copies of Mr. Pendulum Sorcerer. These are basically your other Pendulum cards that are not related to Magicians exactly, which that's why I wanted to put them in their own section. Perform Pulse Pendulum Sorcerer is an amazing card that helps you activate your double iris and all that stuff, which is really, really good. So this card is just great in general. It's just helping you to pop your own cards that you don't need in scale, getting you 2 cards in your hand that you can just use for later down the line, which will be Perform Pulse Skull Cobra Joker and Celestial, which Perform Pulse Skull Cobra Joker is just any normal summon that you want to. Also super happy that this card is at 3, so you can just get anything you want to in your deck, which is insane. Astrograph is at 1. It's a shame that it's only at 1, but maybe that means that we're going to get Electromite to 1. Although maybe because Beyond of the Pendulum, which is the other related card that we're going to get in Dimension Force, maybe not, but we'll have to wait and see. Point is, this card is insane when you draw it. If you don't draw it, it's just okay, I guess. Like, your games are going to be played the same. It's just really, really good to have another card that just, if you pop stuff, is just giving you an additional extender. That's actually pretty nice. Which works with your Wisdom Eyes, with your Chronograph himself, if you put it in scale, and then use it to pop itself and summon a Time Gazer. That's also an option. Chronograph is good for the fact that you can just get out of your hand the Perform Pulse Pendulum Sorcerer, which is actually insane when you pop a card, because this card does work even if you just special summon it. It doesn't have to be Pendulum summon. So if you have this, and, like, for example, a Wisdom Eyes in scale, and you pop one of them, right? Like, you pop 2 of them. Like, you can just put 2 double irises, then you have this and this in hand. Basically, you can use this card effect when a card gets popped. You summon this out of your hand, pop your 2 scales, get your 2 Pendulum Graphs, and get 2 monsters out of your hand, which will be Perform Pulse Skull Cobra Joker and Celestial, which is insane. If you're able to do that, this is actually one of your strongest hands that you can go into. So these are all really, really good, and in my opinion, pretty mandatory. There are some people who like to cut this card down to 2, which I could see that, but that's honestly just up to you. And then for the last 3 monsters that are not related for the deck itself in terms of like being Pendulum, but related because they're good, double tuning Magician and 1 copy of Artifact Scythe. Scythe is disgusting, but we have to play it as long as it's legal because we do want to buy ourselves a turn. So Scythe is absolutely amazing in that regard, just giving you, setting this and then just pop it with our extra deck options. And then if the opponent doesn't really know how to play around it, basically we're just able to lock them for a turn and then basically able to OTK them next turn. Tuning Magician is a great card to just have as a tuner. I actually was considered to only run this one at 1, because you technically don't really need this more than 1, and then you can just run things like Effect Veiler, like I mentioned a million of times, because Effect Veiler is technically a spellcaster monster that works with your Selene and all that stuff. But I do like to see this card in this deck, because in this deck we don't have Electromite, which in masterduel, while they do have some cards at 1 there, like Double Iris and all that stuff at 1, they do have the advantage because they have Electromite, which gives them the ability to generate more resources. This deck doesn't really have that, and we kind of depend on Haki Fibrax or Dagda itself to do some particular things. So this particular 2 cards are just really, really good. You can run this away with 1, but if you get 1 in your hand and you don't have another tuner in deck, it's just dead, so I decided to just go with 2, and it's been working amazingly. Now, last thing I would say is that this is a little bit problematic in time, but, you know, worst case scenario, like I said, you can just side in things like Effect Veiler. These can actually work quite nicely. But that's pretty much does it for the main deck. Main deck is, of course, actually main deck. Monster lineup, because the monster lineup is so big, I thought actually it's the entire main deck. But monster lineup is 33 monsters, just to let you understand how big that is. Now we actually move into the spells and traps, because we only have 7. 1 copy of Upstart Goblin, triple copies of Duelist Alliance, 1 copy of Penco, 1 copy of Star Pendulum Graph, and 1 copy of Time Pendulum Graph. Now these 2, you don't need to run more than 1 each because they're searchable, and Double Iris is not a hard one per turn, and these are bricks if you just draw multiple copies of them, so they're fine. Duelist Alliance also just makes a lot of sense. Grab to you either these 3, Pendulum Sorcerer or Double Iris itself, which is really good. Upstart Goblin is 39 deck consistency, and Pendulum Call is a card that I'm seeing a lot of debate in the community if to run 1, 2, or 3. I like the card, don't get me wrong, but the problem with this card a lot of the time is that it's a -2. Like, the problem with this card is that right now Ash is being played a lot. It's not like Ash is being played like nothing, like previous format that like Ash was played but not that many. Like many decks have played her at 3, they played like Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence more than Ash Blossom, and Ash Blossom was like the secondary to 3rd hand trap, if not the 4th. This format, Ash Blossom is actually kind of front to center again, so having Pendulum Coil is just really, really bad. Like, if this gets ashed, you're just really sad. So I don't really want to get ashed. I'm running this at 1. You could run this at 2 if you want to cut the Upstart Goblin and run 2 Pendulum Coil, or you can even cut another card and run 3 of this regardless if you want to still protect your skills, although, like I said, it does conflict with your other Pendulum effects and other stuff that you actually want to get these to your hand, or get Wisdom Eye effects to trigger, but, you know, you can do whatever you want to. This have been working really well for me. But that does it for the main deck finally. Yes, now I'm not confusing this. We actually run 40 cards, like I said. We have a really, really big chunk of monsters, which actually confused me. Now we actually move into, well, the extra deck. And for the extra deck, we're going to start with the Synchro monsters first. We have 1 copy of TG Wonder Magician, 1 copy of Ifridong Dragster, 1 copy of Savage, and 1 copy of Barony de Fleur. Now, Barony de Fleur is pretty easy. You bring this out either with your Oath plus Harmonizing, or you bring this with TG Wonder Magician and plus Artifact Scythe during the opponent's turn, with Crystal Haki Fibrax, which then just bring this, pop your Scythe summon itself, activate its effect, use this and it as a quick synchro, go into this, you got yourself an interruption. Very, very good. Borderload Savage Dragon, just a really, really good borderline card. You could technically just run Berserker of the Tenyi if you think like you don't really get enough Link monsters to actually make this work. But I never really faced that problem, so this is just as good as a one-off, and it's just doing well. And then the FA Dawn Dragster could be any synchro or any card that you want to. I noticed a lot of time that I have level 6 like monsters on my field, and then I also have the what it called, the Tuning Magician Engrave, and I cannot do anything with it besides going to like a Link monster, which not always is good for the situation, so that's why I decided to go with Dawn Dragster. It's a good level 7 synchro, it's in corruption for spells and traps. I think it's pretty good as a one-off. This, like I said again, could be any card that you want to, but I really like FA Dawn Dragster. And then for the Xyz monsters, we have 1 copy of Baguski, 1 copy of Tornado Dragon, 1 copy of Time Star Magician, 1 copy of Supreme King Dark Rebellion, and 1 copy of AA Zeus, Sky Thunder. These are my Xyz monsters of my choice. Again, you can just run whatever you want to, but I think Time Star and Tornado Dragon are just a must because these cards are just allowing you for your deck to work. Time Star is your searcher for stuff and also just allowing your Time Pendulum graph to be absolutely insane to send 2 cards instead of 1. Tornado Dragon is just to pop the artifact Scythe during the opponent's turn if we have 2 level 4s and not the Haki Fibrax route. Baguska is to buy yourself 2 turns if you need to, against some particular matches, which actually is good. It's really dependent on the matchup, but this can actually be a card that, like, against even back row decks, you can just sit on this. They don't really going to do a whole lot anyway. You sit on this, buying yourself 2 turns, regardless, so they will not be able to kind of like, you know, extend that much because their game will be just kind of still, or just in general, like you facing a deck that is really annoying and just, you know, you can just put this and just buying you 2 turns. Dark Rebellion, the Supreme King version, is just because it's a good OTK tool. And then Zeus is actually, if you do decide to attack with your Baguska or something like that, and you want to slap something on top of it, which will be an interruption, this can also be cut down for whatever you feel necessary. And then for our links, honestly, I run a very small package of links compared to last time because you don't really need that much, and we run these 6 specifically in our deck, which is the 1 copy of Artemis, the 1 copy of Dagda, the 1 copy of Kirsten Haki Firebrax, 1 Selene, 1 Appaloosa, and 1 Boral Sword, which can be access code if you have it. Honestly, it doesn't really matter that much, but the point is, this is the lineup of cards that I recommend to run in the extra deck. You could run more Link monsters, like a 2nd copy of Haki Firebrax, a 2nd copy of Selene, but it's really not necessary with Artemis in the extra deck. Artemis basically serves as your link 1 to link into Harmonizing. If you normal summon the Harmonizing, you can link into it, you go into this, you get your Harmonizing back to hand with Oath, and then you Pendulum summon, get the 2 monsters, go into Haki Firebrax, get another monster, then go into the Dagda, and then even pass the turn to your opponent. That's exactly fine, and it works wonders. Like, trust me, this just works amazingly. Artemis is just to help you unclog if you need to. Dagda is for the artifact Scythe. Haki Firebrax is for the, just amazing plays. Selene is actually not that good in this deck specifically because we lost Desires, because we don't really have a whole lot of spells. So this version of the deck is actually not that great with this, so I do not recommend to run more than 1, so like most of the time you're just going to have 2 counters, maybe 3 if you're going to have the Star Pendulum Graph, but if you don't have Star Pendulum Graph, you're just going to have 2. Then Appaloosa is for going first, and Boral Sword is for going second. Now, one last thing I will add into this is that basically, specifically, you could run the 2nd copy of Haki Firebrax, but there's really no reason to, because in this particular list, what I'm trying to do right now is that I'm trying to play this list a little bit smartly, not use the entire lineup of cards, and trying to kind of like leave 2 to 3 cards in my hand to then have a follow-up to then just deal with my opponent, like committing as much list as possible and doing as much as possible at the same time to lock my opponent and essentially just prevent them from doing anything for a turn and then just OTK them in the next one if I'm going first. So that's kind of like the entire purpose and the way that you do that. But that's pretty much does it for the list itself where it comes to the, TCG version. Now we'll move on into the version of Master Duel because I know that there are some people who wonder about that. Right, so Master Duel change time. Now for Master Duel specifically, I know that there's a lot of cards here, like 5 cards specifically, that are basically just hit on the ban list, and you cannot just use them in Master Duel specifically, as well as just some particular cards that are not in Master Duel, like Perani de Fleur. So I decided to just think about what specifically cards you can run instead, and let's get started with the main deck, because we do have some particular cards to cut down. So first off, for the main deck, I would cut because of the TCG, we have it, but not in Master Duel. 2 copies of Double Iris, the 1 copy of Harmonizing, and the double copies of Chronograph. These are cards that you have to cut 100% because of your ban list in Master Duel. The other card I would recommend to cut is 1 copy of Tuning Magician because it doesn't really do a whole lot, and I will explain that in a second. And the last card is the copy of Time Gazer Magician because Time Gazer Magician at 1, when Chronograph is at 1, again, just doesn't really do a whole lot. But again, you can run it and the Stargazer Magician if you want to just play around with your astrograph and chronograph. But those cards at 1, I don't think you should take the risk with that. But what I recommend to put instead? Well, the first 2 cards I recommend to put is 2 copies of Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser. Curtain Raiser is absolutely amazing. It's giving you the additional extender that you basically need and you lost, and it's actually very, very good. The additional card that I recommend to run in the deck is basically a copy of, well, you can run just hand traps. You can run specifically 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, 3 copies of whatever you need to. You can run those in your deck and have no problem with that one specifically. Although I do recommend to maybe run Effect Veiler instead, because Effect Veiler does have synergy with Selene if you are going to go to that route. But mostly, if you run Effect Veiler, that's completely fine. You can just summon directly from your deck with Hacky Firebracks, and you will be okay with that. Because Tuning Magician in this list is used a little bit more less, because we do have Heavy Metal for Electromite, which is just kind of like the card that we're going to instead of Hacky Firebracks, and Hacky Firebracks is just an overall extender on top of that. So you don't really need to run that. And then for the last 2 cards, I will just cut those down and put 2 additional copies of Upstart Goblin, just to make your deck 37 cards instead of 40, giving you more consistency, giving you more spells engraved for Selene if you are going to extend into Selene, and that's actually going to work quite well for you. Now, in the case of the extra deck, there are some particular changes because you can cut the Boros Sword and run the Access Code. The second thing that you can cut is Berani de Fleur because there's really no reason for her, and instead you can run Rowdy Rose Dragon if you want to run that for your, way to bring out Artifact Scythe and TG Wonder Magician. Although you can just decide to run something else, but like I said, you can run that if you want to because that's an option for you. Then the other thing I would cut is the copy of F.A. Dawn Dragster because we're not going to go into level 7 synchros that much in this deck ever because of the way the deck actually changes and the way that you don't really need that much tuners. So instead I will cut the F.A. Dawn Dragster and put instead of it Heavy Metal for Electromite, of course. And then the last card I will actually cut 2 cards. I will cut the Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder to run the Supreme King Starving Venom. And actually, you could cut specifically another 1 or 2 cards, but I guess actually I will cut just 1 card for that, and then I will still keep the Supreme King Dark Rebellion because I actually thought about a second to cut that, but I think it's still really good for OTK plays, so I recommend to leave that in the extra deck. Although, again, you can cut that and put whatever you feel necessary because technically Access Code giving you the OTK, but I think having different ways to reach the OTK is also an option. So basically, these are the changes for Master Duel. Hope it's helped you to understand how that works. And of course, the deck list is playing as I'm talking, so you can just basically see what exactly I'm talking about. But that's pretty much does it for the Master Duel changes. Now let's move on into the next deck choice. Alright, so for the next deck choices, we have the 3 returning options, which are Ancient Gears, Cyber Dragons, and Lyrilusk. And then for our 4th option, I actually had a little bit of a hard time thinking about it for a while because I'm not really sure what I want to do for the 4th option. But I looked through my videos for a while that I didn't really do something specifically, and I actually decided to do specifically, what's their name again? Time Thief. I think Time Thief is a cool deck. I haven't done Time Thief in a little bit of a while, so if you want to see Time Thief, let me know in the comments down below, because Time Thief is basically another way to play Raid Raptors or Blackwings. Again, that's a particular strategy, which I think is really cool, but they have their own set of unique cards, which they make them really, really fun. So, like I said, the 4 options are the following: Time Thief, Ancient Gears, Lyrilusk, Cyber Dragon, and yeah, that's pretty much all the options for the next videos. Let me know in the comments down below what you want to see. Remember, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.